How you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, just talking also before about Utah, like what an interesting state. So you got a chunk of land and you run your spy training camp down in southern Utah. That's interesting. So what's that like? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Utah. So I was born and raised in Virginia, just right
You
outside
were
of Washington, D.C.
right.
And as soon as I left the agency, I was like, I want to get out of this traffic. I want to get out of this nonsense. And we also wanted to open up our spy school. And southern Utah's got good land, cheap land. It's a wonderful place. And so we've got our 320-acre spy ranch where we do a bunch of training out there.
That's cool. Yeah, Utah's an interesting place. I mean, I was drawn by the skiing, so we've got a little ski place up in Eden where Powder Mountain and
Yep.
Snow Basin are. And I just heard that I think it's Reed Hastings, whoever the CEO of Netflix has just bought Powder Mountain from the Summit Group. It's pretty
Oh.
interesting. Yeah, Summit
Yeah,
Group
because
was
I know those
Ashton
guys.
Kutcher's
You
thing,
know, I've done a bunch of training with them. They brought me in. It's a beautiful area.
isn't it?
Uh,
Yeah.
but I had no idea that Reed Hastings had bought it.
Literally just, I think this has happened the last couple of months.
Huh.
Yeah, that whole area is going to be booming. I mean, Utah's booming just like everywhere else that has open air and land and beautiful mountains.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is like I live in a small town. 30 minutes up the mountain is a ski resort, and I don't ski, believe it or not.
You don't.
But during the pandemic, because our small town was open, kids were in school, nobody
Yeah.
was wearing masks. All
Amazing.
these people from California and Las Vegas flooded our small town, and of course, housing prices and everything went through the roof.
What's the name of your town?
Cedar City.
Cedar City. Okay. Yeah, next time I drive out, I'll have to swing by and check out your place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're near Zion and Bryce, about an
Yeah.
hour and a half from each. So Zion's my favorite park in the world. It's a great
It's
place to
incredible.
go.
That park, like that everyone should go to Zion and Bryce. Man, those are just some beautiful parts of this country. Just stunning. Yeah.
If you ever have a chance, do the Narrows. The Narrows is a hike through the water in Zion Park.
I know.
it's
We didn't
a
get to
hike.
do that because we went up there right when it opened from COVID, and they weren't letting you up for some reason.
Wow.
Or, it was just flooded with people. I think that's why.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
an
that's cool.
awesome hike.
Well, I always like to kind of like start out our conversation just really about the person. We'll get into the what you do and the cool stuff about your work. But you said you grew up in Virginia. What was your childhood like? What were some of the biggest influences and challenges and kind of like inspirations that led you to even join the agency and whatever? I don't know much about your background, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I had a fairly normal childhood, very blessed, nothing crazy, no trauma, nothing outrageous like that or horrible like that. So dad owned his own business. Mom was a school teacher, born and raised just a few miles outside of D.C. And I always loved just doing boy stuff, quote unquote, running around in the woods, shooting each other with BB guns.
Same. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an Eagle Scout when being an
Right.
Eagle Scout meant something.
Right.
So being in the Boy Scouts, being an Eagle Scout, I was camping all the time. I was doing wilderness survival activities. And it was kind of that where it's like, you know what? When I grow up, I don't want a real job. I don't want to be sitting behind some desk, like shuffling papers for the next 40 years.
Right.
So I'd say the Scouts had a big influence on me. And then where I was at, we had some woods behind our house, and just going in the woods and painting. There was a river not too far and all that. So I've always loved activities in the outdoors.
I tell you, just pin that. I had the same experience, and so I grew up in upstate New York, and upstate New York, as you know, is not like the city at all. Like it's
Right,
just
exactly.
tons and tons of land, and so I could just go out and just go cross country skiing on my own in the wintertime. During the summer, we would go up to the Adirondacks and go to Lake Placid. We had a house on the west shore of Lake Placid, which had no road access. So we had to either hike in or take a boat. So we had a small fleet of boats, and it was a pretty nice setup. But my backyard was the mountain range. My front
Yeah.
yard was the lake. And I was in 6 million acres of protected wilderness called the Adirondack State Park. I tell you what, like that was the better than any teacher I've ever had or any academic degree I've ever received. It's extraordinary. And I really fear that kids don't really have access to that for the most part, especially in the coastal cities and where most people are packed in. And the way people are living with their constant connection to the digital devices, they've really lost that. So I hope to help people get back into nature and back outside. It's such a powerful thing that we had that maybe we took it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. So I've got 6 kids, and we have a four-wheeler. They go ride around the four-wheeler on our land. They go play. They go do things.
Sweet.
And I'm like, get out and go here. I mean, you know how much I wish I would have had 320 acres growing up. Even though I had a great childhood and had that land,
Right.
like I wish I had a four-wheeler. And we actually own 2 ATVs because we got the 6 kids, so they can split it. I'm like,
Nice.
you know how much I wish I had 2 ATVs growing up. You guys go out there, ride them around, and don't kill each other. So,
Exactly. Good instructions.
yep.
Awesome. So I see you're wearing a Penn State shirt. Was that your alma mater?
You know, it wasn't. I dated a girl.
Okay.
And as I just said, I got 6 kids, so you can see how old this T-shirt is right now. It's a very old T-shirt. But I went to school.
Typical agency guy is wearing the same shit you did when you were in your 20s.
Yeah, seriously. Like I have zero fashion sense unless I'm doing some kind of corporate speaking where I'm in my suit and tie.
Right.
It's jeans and a T-shirt or cargo pants and a T-shirt. So yeah, it's about as exciting as it gets.
Yeah, same here. So what was what was kind of like took you out of the woods and got you into the path you were on?
So you went to school in Southern Virginia at a school called Radford University. It's basically the redheaded stepchild of Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
And I was getting ready to graduate college, knew I wanted to do something, not a desk job. And being from DC, I mean, everything was in your backyard, right? Every
Yeah.
government agency. So I applied at police departments, I applied to the Secret Service, I applied to the CIA, I applied to probably a dozen different agencies. And my very first job out of college was a local police department in Virginia.
Right on.
But very soon after, it was the exact same week that the Secret Service and the agency offered me a job. And incredibly blessed again. I was like, well, I think the agency is probably going to be a bit, more enjoyable, a bit more fun. And so I joined the agency and didn't look back and didn't regret it one bit.
How many people do they hire right out of college? That's interesting. I mean, I have a bunch of peers, as you are aware, who are in ground branch, but they shifted over to the agency after 15 or 20 years in special ops, and that makes sense to me. But taking someone right out of college, I guess you got to train them up from scratch. That's what they're thinking, just like the SEALs would.
Well, I mean, you just said it perfectly. So the agency kind of takes a combination of people,
Right.
meaning they want really well-rounded. And so I was pretty much, besides the police department, but I was pretty much right out of college. I was 23 when I joined the agency.
Wow.
So with the agency, there was a bunch of college kids with me, and then, as you said, a bunch of former Special Forces guys, SEALs, Delta, whatnot. Yeah. And so that was kind of the mixture of us. It was just a real well-rounded motley crew.
Right.
And I mean it was
But
great.
Did the agency hire you to be like a field operative, or because they like I had a CPA, they could have hired me for the finance division, or
they did not hire me to be a CPA. I can tell you that much. So yeah, I was doing surveillance, counter surveillance, some EP, data protection type of work, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Not smart enough to be an analyst, but I mean it was great. I love the
So
agency.
Jack Ryan's the analyst, but they kind of like take a little bit of liberty with that guy, right? Like
Right,
he's
exactly,
doing everything. Yeah. He's the super SEAL and the analyst.
Yeah,
There's probably not too many of those guys.
Not that I knew. I mean, maybe they're out there, but yeah. The analysts are usually, I mean, they're awesome, they're great, but they're doing their analyst stuff, and they're not out there on the streets doing stuff. But
That's fascinating. So tell us, most listeners are unfamiliar with the farm. Tell us about the experience of, indoctrination and the initial training through the farm, which is kind of like buds for you guys. Mm-hmm. And then what was the career like? Like, what's it like to work for the agency? To me, it sounds terrifying. You don't know who to trust.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so the farm, I'd say, and again, remember, I'm police and then CIA. I didn't serve in the military.
Right.
But the farm is militaristic. It's in a boot camp in a way, meaning they want to weed out the weak. They want to get rid of the people that are going to make it. You do PT and they make you miserable doing your push-ups and sit-ups and all that. But also, of course, there's a psychological element. They want to make sure you have the mental toughness. And I don't have to tell you this, is that mental toughness is really what it's about.
Right.
I mean, I had guys who were college football players in my class, like breaking down in tears at times. And while I'm certainly never going to be the strongest guy, I enjoy suffering, and I can out-suffer most people.
Check.
So, it was good. It was good training. I mean, amazing training. A lot of the instructors are former SEALs, former Delta, a lot of contractors, like you said, ground branch guys. So incredible shooting, driving, all kinds of training. Mm-hmm. And then you got all you can eat at the cafeteria. So what more is that?
Yeah, and you got a bed to sleep in once in a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So Do they really get into field craftsmanship at the farm, or is it like Buzz, just basic stuff?
No, it
Shooting,
depends what you're
jumping.
doing. So different things you go more in depth on, depending
Yeah.
on what you're going to do long term. And so, yeah, they get into it. They teach it to you. You run scenarios, obviously, a lot of scenario-based stuff. And, I'd say, I'm trying to think of my class. I don't even remember how big my class was. Let's say 24. And probably, I think most of us made it. The few that washed out, because you've already got your top secret security clearance, obviously the agency already invested all that time clearing you.
Yeah, they want to keep you.
On you. So if you wash out, it's not like you get completely fired. You go to the proverbial basement where you're doing some horrible, boring job, and they just like, okay, you washed out. Here's your desk job in the basement where you'll never be seen again. But you have your TSSCI clearance, and we don't want to waste that.
Do you get a second chance if you wash out?
That is a great question, because I know the guys who washed out and pretty much I never saw them again. Maybe I bumped into them once in the headquarters building when we were walking, and we just say, oh, hey, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you ever get out of that basement job and if there's other opportunities. That's a good question.
Right. So what's it like, I know without revealing anything that you can't reveal, what's a career path like?
So the wonderful thing is the agency really wants you to be well-rounded. So you can do a job for 3 years, and then they're like, hey, now we want you to go here for 3 years, or now we want you to do this for 3 years.
It's like the SEALs, yeah.
And what's really cool is you can take pretty much any training you want, even if it's not your specific job. So I could be looking at our training options, and even though I had no need, and I'm just making this up, but let's say it was safe cracking 101, right?
Right.
Even though my job did not require safe cracking, I can be like, you know what, I want to take that. And they're like, okay, go ahead and take it. So they were very open to education, to being well-rounded, to all this kind of stuff. I mean, they were going to pay for me to go get my master's degree before I decided I was going to leave the agency. So they're all about education, and they're all about just making sure you can, again, move around and you're not working in the exact same spot for 20 years.
Right. That's fascinating. How many years were you in the agency?
So I was there 7 years.
7 years. So you weren't there long enough to see what was going on at the higher echelons. And I'm just curious, what is your view on the agency today in terms of its just its reach and its accountability or lack thereof? I'm just curious. It seems to me whenever something really bad goes on, there's some sort of tendril that you could trace back to the agency.
Yeah. So I didn't stay at the agency 30 years, 40 years, but I had many mentors who did. And they were, I joined at 23, they were in their 50s at the time, amazing men and women, learned a lot from them. So I would say, as we know, most of the stuff you hear that the agency stops, you never hear about. Meaning you don't hear about the amazing operations that go through. You don't hear about
Same thing with special ops. You only hear about the fuck ups, right? With the
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I will say about the agency, and this is, I don't care anybody's politics. I mean, I'm very conservative. That's no secret.
Right.
But when there's a Republican president, the agency is allowed to do more. They're allowed to get more boots on the ground. They're allowed to take more risks. The country's safer because they're allowed to gather more intelligence. And anybody will tell you this, again, regardless of your politics. When a Democrat comes in as president, they're like, you know what, we don't want as many people on the ground. We just want satellites to do it. We just want signals intelligence. We don't want anything that could cause a problem and be an international incident. So there's a lot less risk taken. And so that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, the men and women are great. They're awesome. They work very hard. Yeah. It's just the problems of who's president at the time, because then it dictates how many risks the agency is allowed to take and how much gathering of intelligence actually happens.
Right. That's really interesting. We saw with COVID just how intertwined big pharma is with some of these other health organizations, FDA, CDC, even at the UN, WHO level. Is any of that play out at the agency that you're aware of, where corporate interests are kind of interweaving? So I know that InQtel is, you got your own venture fund, and there's a lot of cross pollination with the tech world. So could that influence the CIA's outside of or extra political?
I didn't see any of that. I mean, obviously, you said InQtel is the agency's incubator, and they're always looking for the private sector to, hey, what's the next greatest thing? What's the next greatest tactic or spy thing? But no, the agency, I mean, as much as everybody likes to bash them, as much as everybody likes to say they're controlled by so-and-so or this or that, is they're pretty independent.
Yeah.
I will say, is somebody always, not somebody, but people often ask me, hey, Jason, what is the real deep state? Did you see the deep state at CIA? And I say, yes, I will tell you 100% what the real deep state is because I've seen it. It is not the President of the United States because he's gone every 4 to 8 years. It's not some senator. The deep state in the government is the middle manager.
It's the bureaucracy.
There for 30 years and just ruins stuff and makes it miserable. And, no, it
Right.
really is.
Yeah.
I mean, and I saw this. I had supervisors, and thankfully it was only one supervisor, and she was a typical example of the D state causing problems, not doing her job, but you couldn't fire her because she was a government employee with her top secret security clearance. So it's that middle manager that ruins everything. That's who the United States needs to be afraid of.
I agree with you, and I have a particular view on this too. Like, generally, whenever president was elected, he would bring in, a handful. When I say a handful, up to 100 maybe, of his loyalists and friends, and put them into the alphabet soup executive branch agencies. And so over time, we really had a balance of viewpoints, right, in the agencies. Well, Obama changed all that because when he came in, he brought in 3,000 people into the federal bureaucracy, and you can guarantee those people were of one ilk, right?
Right. Yep.
And so that was really where the deep state, which was just basically the bureaucracy, started to actually look like a deep state that was having an agenda that was not as balanced as we were used to. I know that's my theory, and I'm not the only one who has that theory, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, I saw it, and I know it's in many other agencies, and that's the problem. Yeah,
that's a big problem. So let's shift focus because you got some cool stuff that you do. Your book, Spy Secrets That Can Save Your Life, and the stuff you teach down in Utah. Let's dig into that. Like, why did you write the book? And was it something that happened in your life, or just your desire to protect your family? Like, what was the impetus to turn this into a business and a life?
Sure.
Lifestyle?
So, when I left the agency, I mean, I love what I did. Right. I love personal protection. I love safety, self-defense. All that stuff. I really loved it. And I was doing a bunch of corporate work. Right. And it was almost these huge corporations, like literally sneaking me in the back door and saying, hey, sign this NDA, you can't tell anybody, blah, 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 that type of stuff. And then, I hated that. Well, I didn't hate it. I mean, it was great money, but I didn't like the corporate lawyers and the bureaucracy and all the stuff that was like the government. But there was this Shark Tank, the television show. I had never seen it, but some buddy of mine was like, hey, there's this show, you should go on it. And I was like, no, I don't want publicity. I don't, that's not me. It's like the exact opposite of what I do. And I had a business mentor because I was trying to learn how to run a business, obviously. I need to know how to do that. And he said to me, are you good at what you do? Will it help people? And I said, well, yeah, I am. It will. He said, well, then you actually need to get out and promote yourself and stop being an idiot who's hiding, behind the curtain kind of thing. Right. So I went on the show Shark Tank, and it worked out. I got a deal with Damon John. And that kind of transitioned me to the masses. Meaning before I was doing corporate, high net worth individuals only, friends and family type of thing. And so you were doing actual security or teaching?
So
both. Yeah.
I see.
So executive protection, also security training, like some very wealthy guy. Well, he'd say, hey, I'm going to Europe for 2 weeks and I want a bodyguard for 2 weeks in Europe only, not when I'm in the States. Or, hey, I want you to come into my house and teach my college-age kids self-defense, how to protect themselves. So it was stuff like that. And then after Shark Tank, it grew to more the masses, not just the super wealthy billionaires or people like that or politicians. Right. And it was evasive driving. It was hand-to-hand self-defense. It was, hey, teach me concealed carry stuff. So it kind of morphed. And I like working with, ordinary Americans, quote unquote, much better than the corporate bureaucracy stuff.
Yeah. Has your business ticked up since the COVID crisis? I bet it has.
Absolutely has. So my business, like many other in the security industry, just took off like a rocket during COVID. And the only thing that hurt during COVID was the executive protection business, because that's a division of our company. So obviously, the award shows, the music concerts, because we do a lot of musicians, those weren't taken off. But as far as the training, our phone was ringing off the hook of, hey, can you come in and teach my clients this or teach my family this? And so the security.
What's the name of your company?
So Spy Briefing is the name of the company.
Spy Briefing?
Yep, Spy Briefing.
Oh, cool. Interesting. So about the kind of like the juicy takeaways that we can get into on a podcast. Probably not going to teach any self-defense in terms of hand-to-hand combat, but let's talk about an individual's, let's say there's a woman listening who's concerned for safety, in a parking garage, dark at night, or even just leaving the house early in the morning. Some of the basic scenarios. What are some of the things you recommend for us, an individual to protect themselves?
Yeah, one of the things I always teach, and I say it's the world's most important spy skill, but it's not the world's sexiest spy skill, is an SDR, which stands for surveillance detection route. Mm-hmm. And all that means is, okay, let's pretend you all are spies, everybody listening and watching. Let's say you're going to a meeting in Russia with your asset. You're not going to go from your hotel room to McDonald's, your meeting, right? Because you can be followed. So first you go to Walmart, and then you go to Starbucks, and then you go to get your dry cleaning, and then you go get gas. So you go to all those different places running a surveillance detection route so you can see if you're being followed and pick up on anybody. So I teach people how to do that, and I say, listen, let me tell you a real life story. Had this woman, she was in the Macy's shoe department. There was some guy she said, hey, this guy's making me feel uncomfortable. So she went over to perfume. 2 minutes later, this guy shows up in perfume. Then she goes over to the housewares. 2 minutes later, guy shows up in housewares. Then she goes over to women's clothing. Guy shows up in women's clothing.
Chances are he's not shopping there, right? Yeah.
Right. She's run a 5-minute surveillance detection route. She knows she's being followed. So she said, I saw a security guard. I went up to the security guard. I pointed out this creepy guy, and the creepy guy took off running out front of Macy's shoe department, and they never saw him again. And she had the security guard walk her to her car. So I say, listen, all of us can run an SDR in 5 minutes. I mean, if you think you're being followed home, go around the block. If that car is still, following you after you've gone around the block, you're being followed. So that's a simple, important spy skill that anybody can do.
Yeah. If someone, without being overly paranoid, how would you know if you're being followed in a car?
So, yeah, I mean, before, if you're with the agency, right, you can't make it obvious. You can't start doing crazy turns and turn everything, because then surveillance will know you're trying to evade them, and they'll say, hey, this is intelligence.
Right.
But luckily, us civilians here in the U.S., we don't have to keep anything a secret. Meaning, go down a one-way street. Is that car still following you down a one-way street? Okay, flip a U-turn. Does that car immediately flip a U-turn? So things that are not normal human behavior. Now, somebody may happen to take a right and then a right like you, but they're probably not going to go around the block and flip a U-turn. That is really out of character. So simple things like that are just so easy to tell. Okay, now I'm being followed.
Right. But are there any tells? I mean, we drive every day. Cars are behind us all the time. So what's a tell that maybe someone's following you?
So if you had the pros following you, check their tires. Meaning overseas, they may be driving let's just say, Toyota Corolla, right? But they're going to have really fancy tires on it that do not match Toyota Corolla, because surveillance always has good tires. So if somebody's following you and you're like, hey, this is a junker Honda Accord from 1997, but hey, he's got tires that are $2,000 tires each, well, that's probably surveillance, or somebody's got too much money.
That's interesting. I imagine that's just because they expect to drive fast and burn some rubber. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't want to lose you. Yeah, they want to make sure they got great tires so they can always keep up with you. What I always tell people is listen, and you're going to know this well too. If you screw up in the U.S. government, the joke is you get promoted, right? If you screw up in other countries, you may get killed, or your family may get imprisoned. So they really take their job seriously. They really want to make sure they're not losing you while they're following you, because that's a big, big deal. They can get in trouble.
Right. That's interesting. What about home defense? What are the most important things to do there?
Yeah, so I tell people, listen, when we go overseas, we case everything. And casing is simply, okay, where are the cameras on this building? Where are the one-way streets? Where is the security guard? What time is, it's casing everything about it. So one of the things I do is a home security audit. People bring me in, they have me go over their house, and I say, listen, I'm going to case your neighborhood first, because we don't want your house to be the weakest link on the street. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make sure that we've got your alarm signs. I want to make sure that we got your cameras. Driveway alarms are huge. Every home, very few people have a driveway alarm, and so I deal.
What does that do? So when someone drives in, you get an alert?
Yeah. So it's just think of it like it's literally a stake with a passive infrared sensor on it. Nail the stake in the grass next to your driveway, and anytime somebody drives down your driveway, it's a chime inside your house. So the base station is inside your house.
Right.
And so a lot of the high net worth guys have these very long driveways, and we're like, you want to know somebody's coming,
Right.
and so we put a passive infrared sensor PIR at the top, and we put it towards the bottom because sometimes an animal runs through one, right? So we've got two, so we know, okay, 2 chimes, we know someone's coming. And even on my personal reference, can't even speak, personal residence, I've got one of these PIR alarms because I want to know if the boogeyman's coming.
Right.
Obviously, I've got cameras. I've got an alarm system inside. I've got my gun on my nightstand. My wife has her gun on her nightstand in safes, rapid access safes, because my kids are still young since I didn't have kids until I left the agency. So
Is your rapid access safe like a thumbprint, or how do you get in it
so
rapidly?
I don't use thumbprints only because those biometric safes, from what I've tested, there's not one good enough on the market to work all the time. Meaning,
Right.
if you're dirty when working in the garden, if you're sweating, they won't open. So I have a good old non-electronic simplex safes where I just push 4 keys in still, but it's not electronic. It pops open. I can grab my handgun, and same thing with my wife. So I use a handgun for home defense just because I've got 6 kids. They're in the basement. They're all over. I can't just hunker down in my master bedroom and point the gun at the door and wait for the cops to door. I've actually got to go clear my house and see where the threat is.
Right. I'm curious about the electric. So I have a push button safe, but it is electronic, and I was worried, like, what if the battery dies? But is that the only reason? Can you disable electronic keypad with some mechanism?
So the electronic ones, I have a backup of that, meaning the ones where you just push this electronic, and I have the simplex. The biometric, where you have to put your fingerprint, those are the ones I don't trust.
Yeah.
But I also have had electronic safes. The batteries die without giving me that battery warning, which is why it's a backup and it's not the main thing I rely on.
I see. Yeah, that's what I was thinking would be the issue. I got to worry about that, huh? Yeah, my wife does not want me to have a weapon inside the house, so that's a problem. Mine are out in the garage, which, hey, could you hold on a second? I gotta go get something.
I had a guy once. Guy hires me, and he says, my wife will not let me keep a round in the chamber, in the house.
Right.
And I said, listen, that's a bad idea because in a stressful situation, you're going to forget to chamber that round. You're going to forget to tap and rack, right? And he's like, well, that's, it's agreement with my wife. So he calls me about 6 months after I trained him. He says, Jason, guess what happened? The other night, middle of the night, somebody's pounding and kicking my front door. I'm sure it's a home invasion. So I grab my gun, I go to the front door, I'm screaming and yelling, I've got a gun, get out of my house. Probably 20 seconds, he's down there pointing the gun. He says the noise stops and everything, right? He later finds out it was some crackhead going around the neighborhood trying to kick in doors, and the police arrested him. But he says, when I was done, I'm shaking, I'm nervous, I realized I never chambered that round. I was pointing an empty gun at the door. I said, well, I told you so. I mean, in a stressful situation, your mind goes to mush, which is why you should have a loaded gun. So
we just finished we have a 3-day training we call Sheepdog for SEAL Fit, and so we teach basic firearms handling just with the pistol, right? So we want civilians who never really handle a firearm, or even if they had, to really understand how to do it safely and not be a threat to themselves or their family, right? Because most people are, right? And then we teach trauma first aid, right? So what if someone does get hurt, right? You need to know what to do. You can't wait for the ambulance. And then basic Krav Maga, right? So and we put all this together into scenarios. This is really effective training. But that was that whole thing about just situational awareness. When you come under stress, and we really hammered it home, you literally lose like 50% of your IQ. If you're at 150 IQ, which is pretty high, and you suddenly get into a crisis situation where your life is threatened, or your family's life is threatened, you literally go down to 75 IQ, which is pretty much like clinically lock up, kind of IQ, or just not functioning well. Right. So you have to realize that that's what the stress response does. It literally sucks your brain. You're not going to remember. So you have to rise to the level of your training instead of stoop to the level of your intellect in those situations, right?
Well, yeah, and I remember, and you know this better than I do, is tunnel vision. I remember people telling me, like, hey, if you ever have to use your gun or draw your gun, you're going to get tunnel vision. And until there was an agency incident that happened to me, I was like, nah, not going to happen to me. You guys are idiots. You don't know what you're talking about, But it was like, holy crap, you get tunnel vision. You don't see anything around you type of thing. So yeah, I don't think most people realize how stressful it's going to be, how your mind is going to go to crap, which is why you need to make it as simple and easy as possible. I mean, my home defense plan is literally grab flashlight, open safe, grab gun, go take care of intruder.
Right.
I mean, it shouldn't be much more complicated than that.
Right. Yeah, that reminds me. I meant to ask you, what was the most effed up thing that happened to you while you were at the agency?
I'm trying to think here. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me in trouble. I mean,
of course.
There's always, this from the military, there's always just like, the joke
Always
was
crazy.
like, really, we're the best and the brightest, like after something would happen or something would
Right.
go down. And it was very, it was infrequent, it didn't happen, but it was like, crap. Yeah, everybody thinks like, the agency or the federal government in general, like you're always going to have the most amazing weapons, the most amazing
Right.
backup, the most amazing gear.
Right.
It's like, yeah, if you knew something.
It's like Tom Cruise every day. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
Right, yeah, where you've really got to be resourceful. Let's just leave it at that.
Thanks for that very generic answer. I love it.
So here's a funny story. So when I leave not everybody, but when you work at the agency, obviously there's the big seal, the big agency seal in headquarters
Oh, yeah.
building.
Yeah. See that.
And so a lot of people, when they get the job there, you get a picture taken in front of it, right? It's that cliche picture of you're in your suit. And so I had that picture taken, and obviously I couldn't use it, but after I left the agency, I put it on my website. And it said, former CIA officer, right? And so I get a cease and desist letter from the agency that says, you can't use this picture because it looks like we're endorsing you. So I call a buddy of mine who's in this general area, and I say, here's what happened. Tell me what's really going on. He says, well, the truth is you can use the picture. However, the agency doesn't like being told no, so we'll send you to the Justice Department and bankrupt you just because you didn't listen to us. So I take the picture down. The point of that is I'm careful what I say, and I love the agency. I do have a great relationship with them.
Yeah, I have the same. I have a similar love-hate relationship with the SEALs. Not hate, love-hate, but when I launched NavySeals.com, they literally tried to steal it. They're like, "We need that." I'm like, "Well, you could buy it from me," and so they tried to take it from me, and I said no, and then they wouldn't let me trademark it, and then they trademarked the Trident and the SEAL name, and I'm like, what are you guys doing, right? You're wasting your time. Let's focus on fighting the battles, right? So finally, over time, they finally let me go. I'm like, I'm doing you a service, right? I'm basically a one-man recruiting band for you guys, so leave me alone. Or buy NavySeals.com. They wouldn't do it.
Right, well, exactly, and that's what's like I said, I have a good relationship now with the agency, and people I've talked to are like, yeah, you are great for the agency, meaning you're a great recruiting tool, just like
Absolutely.
you are, because I think it's awesome. I think everybody should work there. I think the men and women are amazing. So people always say, well, why did you leave? Only because I wanted to get married and have a wife and kids one day. I didn't want to be some of my mentors who were lonely, miserable single men who were divorced. Everything else was great. If you want to have a great lifestyle and be a single man, by all means,
go for it. Same thing with the SEALs. I left because of my marriage, and I just knew that it wouldn't have survived. I stayed in the reserves though, so I had about 10 years active, 10 years reserve. The reserves were kind of a painful experience, to be honest.
I'm sure they were, for you.
Yeah, did some fun stuff, but you never really get taken seriously again once you leave active duty, unless you're on track to be admiral or something like that. So what else? Like, what about traveling overseas? For a husband or a family, something like that. Well, how can they really protect themselves?
Well, I always say, one, obviously, don't go out with your New York Yankees hat or Boston Red Sox. Wear plain, boring clothing. One of the things I loved about being overseas is we know most Americans are obnoxious and loud. Yeah. And so I'm like, hey, I'm walking around plain and boring, so that way nobody pays attention to me. I always tell people, too, like, let me tell you how to bribe the police overseas, because you may need this depending on where you go. Yeah. So without going into detail, it's going to get me in trouble. One time I'm overseas, something happens, surrounded by cops. And so the way you bribe the police is super easy. All you do is first play the dumb American, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And you say, I bet there's a fine to pay. How do I pay that fine? Those are the magic words. It works every time. And so,
how do I pay the fine? Yeah.
Right. How do I pay? It's not like you whip out your wad of cash and be like, here, officer, leave me alone. Because even though they're corrupt, they don't want it to be thrown in their face.
Right.
So in my case, I say, officer, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah. I bet there's a fine to pay. And he's like, it's $50, and you pay me right now. And in my mind, I'm like, you
Man.
fool.
Cut off easy.
Right, you could have $500. And so of course I'm like, oh my gosh, $50, that's so much money. Oh, go, okay, officer, okay, and got out of it. But I mean, especially if you go to Mexico, like 97% of cops there are gonna get paid off, kind of thing. So have cash, both U.S. dollars and the currency of the country you're going in.
Right.
And I always like to have at least $300 of each. Just something comfortable for me. I also bring some gold coins. I've actually got them sitting on my desk. Let me, these. So this is one of my sheets. These are 1/4 ounce of gold, which right now is about $750 a coin. And so I have some that are torn off, and I'll put these in a belt. That way, if I need gold overseas, because it's real gold and everything, and I can bribe the police with gold. So I'm all about having ways to get myself out of jams.
Right.
And then I always say, like, stay at a good hotel, but not the best hotel.
Okay.
Meaning, don't go where every rich American goes, and if there's going to be a terrorist holdup or something's going to happen, like, stay like a few down from. Instead of staying at the Four Seasons, stay at the Holiday Inn, which is still a perfectly normal, good hotel. And then I always say, like, listen, don't stay on the first floor, because if a bomb hits, you don't want to be on the first floor, but don't stay past the sixth floor, because no fire truck ladders or anything is going to get you past the sixth floor. And so I go in depth on stuff on that, but just don't be a fool. Meaning, keep your mouth shut. Don't flash your rings. Don't brag about. I mean, I had some guy, very wealthy businessman, going over to Russia years ago to fly the Russian big jets, and I told him, like, do not tell anybody you're gonna fly Russian big jets, because only super wealthy people do that. He ended up getting drunk, telling a hot chick he was doing this, almost ended up getting kidnapped, and thankfully he didn't. He was fine. But I'm just like, keep your mouth shut.
Right.
And even the stranger asking you a question in the hotel lobby could be somebody who's trying to extract information and see if you're a good target to kidnap. So.
Yeah, there's a good chance there's someone in that lobby, right, who's looking to do that, especially if it's an American hotel.
Exactly.
And I think also part of not standing out is to understand what the local customs and laws are, right? And like, so if you're in the Middle East and the local custom is that that women are wearing something over their head, then suck up your ego and put something over your head if you're a female. You know what I mean? It's like, or like, I think in a lot of those countries, they just do not allow or tolerate any public displays of affection, especially, between gay or those of the same sex. And so I know a lot of people from America are like, well, that's my right. But if you're over there,
not in Saudi Arabia,
not in Saudi Arabia, exactly. You're going to get in trouble. At least you're going to find yourself in a miserable situation. So just respect the local customs and traditions.
And what you just said, I think, is one of the most important things. Like, we are Americans. We're the greatest country in the world. We have egos, and we hate having people telling us what to do. Right. I totally get that. Believe me, I hate having people tell me what to do. But when you're in someone else's country, you're not on U.S. soil. There's no Bill of Rights. There's no Constitution. So I realize, again, you may hate wearing this thing over your head, or you may hate having to bow to somebody, do whatever, but who cares? Do it. It's not worth it getting in some foreign prison. So I'm all for that. I mean, when I'm overseas, and I don't travel overseas that much these days, but when I am, you better believe I obey every custom. I do every stupid thing just because I want to blend in, not stand out, not get in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a slippery slope. You have to kind of mentally game these things out, right? It's like, this is my position, and I believe this should be a global right. But, if I'm in Saudi Arabia and they don't believe me, and suddenly I find myself in jail, and now I've got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and maybe even get the State Department involved to get me out of jail, and I create an international incident, like, is it really worth it? Probably not, right? Unless you're, someone like want to be the next Greta Thunberg for that issue, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Unless you're trying to run for president or senator or whatever.
Right, exactly. That's awesome. When it comes to, like, unarmed self-defense, like, do you have a particular, I know, like, many times, like in the SEALs, we have all sorts of different things that, you can't say that we do blank, because like when I was going through the SEALs, we did, I became an instructor in something called SCARS, Special Combat Aggressive Reactionary System. It was awesome, based on Sansu Kung Fu, which is, developed by the Chinese mob. Very, very offensive, brutal. But one of the reasons they got rid of it is because we would go through these 5-day courses and these 30-day courses, and they probably should have locked us in a rubber room for about a week afterward just to decompress, But the guys would go out to McPee's and stuff, and someone would come up and like slap them on the back, "Hey Joe," and next thing you know, there'd be like a pool of blood on the floor because their whole nervous system was just geared for combat. It's like there's a picture of a shirt that has a frog man in a glass jar, and it says, "In case of war, break glass." That's what we kind of felt like. Anyways, so then they went to jiu-jitsu and, all these different things. I bet you the agency was the same. They had like a hodgepodge lodge, right?
That's exactly what it is. It is
whatever's most effective based upon the scenario.
Yeah, we're going to take this, and this, and this. I mean, it's like every martial art combined.
Right.
Here's what works. Be fast, violent, aggressive.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned that. Like, you leave the farm, and again, I was 23 years old, and you leave the farm at 23. You think you're 20 feet tall and invincible. And
right.
you're going out and you're like, I hope somebody looks at me wrong tonight. I hope somebody, you're a knucklehead young man, right?
Right.
But it sounds like, again, the Navy SEALs are the exact same way because you're amped up. You think you're the best in the world. What you did, you just did this incredibly hard training. So these days,
mostly the young guys, right? So once you get a tour under your belt and you're not an F&G anymore,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
You develop that humility and be like, oh wow, there's a lot of badasses out there. You know what I mean? I'm not the only one.
Right.
But,
correct.
So when you teach self-defense to a civilian, though, like, do you draw from just like scenario based? Okay, in this scenario, like someone's just maybe pulling you out, trying to pull you out the door of your car. Like, this is what you do, or like give us like some basic, like introductory training when you first meet a woman who wants to, or help a daughter.
Yeah. So I do a course called Spy Dangerous, and it's more intense self-defense. But it's 2 days. It's basically like, here's what you need to know what's going to work. And so we teach them, okay, hey, if somebody, tries to hit you, here's how to defend yourself. Here's how to strike back. Here's how to actually strike back and make it count. If somebody tries to knife you, here's how to real life stop a knife attack. And guess what? You're going to get cut, but you're going to live if you do it this way. And so then we do scenarios where we've got airsoft guns and they've got to do a gun disarm. So we're trying to teach them that. We use big red fat markers and they're trying to stab each other and they have the white T-shirt.
Smart.
So
Let's go.
Yeah, so we try and make it pretty intense and be like, this is what it's going to be real life minus us stabbing you with a real knife type of thing.
Right.
But it is a bunch of different scenarios of, hey, you walk into your home one day and all of a sudden there's an intruder and maybe the intruder's going to stand there. What do you do? Or maybe the intruder's going to rush you. How do you deal with that?
Right.
What if you're at a gas station? Because I've had so many clients come to me after gas station attacks kind of thing. So, here's how to be smart at a gas station. Make sure you don't end up knifed or kidnapped or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think, for listeners, I get asked a lot like, hey, what's the best martial arts, to learn how to defend yourself? And I often say none of them, right? Because the martial art is a martial art. That's developing body, mind, and spirit. You want to learn how to defend yourself, then you have to learn a fighting system. And that's what you just described, a fighting system that is scenario-based, right? If this happens, then this is the response, or this is the principle for the type of response to occur. And the only things I found, like Sansu Kung Fu is scenario-based, Krav Maga is scenario-based, or like what you're doing, or like Tim Larkin's target focus training, which is based on Sansu.
Yep.
So if you're thinking, I want to defend myself, do something like that, go to Jason's training. It's only 2 days, and in 2 days, I bet you have testimonials from people like, hey, this happened, and man, whatever I did worked, and I know it came from your 2-day training.
I was going to say, I had a woman who 2 men tried to kidnap at a gas station in Sarasota, Florida, and she was able to fight them off using what I taught her.
That's awesome.
So thankfully, it's a small number of testimonials, but yeah, I do have them because...
Right, yeah, you don't want tons of those.
Right, yeah.
Because your training is causing people to attack. That's not good. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but the other thing about that, it's also about mindset. Like when I got to Buds and the founder of Scars, Jerry Peterson, was teaching, and I had just received my black belt in karate, so I was like, and I was 20, I went to Buds a little later. I was 25 when I went to SEAL training, and I'd spent the last 4 years getting my black belt and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so he comes up to me after about 2 weeks. He goes, Divine, because the name is on my white T-shirt as a Bud student, right? He goes, Divine, you got to unlearn that karate shit. It's going to get you killed someday. And I was like, dang, I just spent 4 years learning that karate shit. But he was right. In fact, in between OCS, or I was at Officer Candidate School, which before Buds, after getting my black belt, I went home upstate New York on New Year's Eve and was hanging out with my brother and went into this bar. And, I had a couple of beers, but I wasn't like anything crazy. And I saw the bartender and I literally just smiled at her and asked her how she was doing. And she goes, "Jimmy, I got another one." And out of the corner comes this scrappy dude, literally flying through the air, latches on and starts choking me out. And I'm like, caught me completely by surprise. And I could feel myself going out. And I'm like, fuck, what do I do? I wasn't taught this in karate, And my brother, fortunately, walked in right then and took care of it for me. I was embarrassed. I was like, holy crap. And then, literally months later, I have Jerry tell me this. You got to unlearn the karate shit. And so based upon that earlier scenario and my trust in Jerry, I said, okay, I think you're right. So it took a little while to unlearn how to block. And his main point was the defensive mindset, right? Someone's going to throw a punch at you, you block it. No, right? Not in the military or CIA. You attack. Even if it looks like a block to someone else, you're trying to break that arm as you're, heading in to take a target that's really vulnerable to land first injury. So I had to learn that. And once I learned that, right, with scars, everything's a target. And I'm sure you teach this very similarly. Everything, I look at a human being and I'm like, okay, that's the first target I would hit. And I know what's going to happen when I hit that target because I know how the body responds. And so that's going to reveal the second target and the third. And so when I learned how to actually dissect a human being like that and to take care of myself, then I never attracted another violent incident. Never attracted another, there's something that happened in the whole kind of matrix where nobody fucked with me. And it wasn't because I was walking around trying to be a badass. I'm actually a really peaceful guy. So it's fascinating. So that's why I'm not in favor of the way the law enforcement is trained. The whole escalation of force. I think the way that you're trained or I train is much more effective and safe because you got to teach someone how to take a life and then to dial it back from there. Anyways, I went on a little rant there. So,
No, I have a saying when I'm teaching my course and people come in, I say, listen, CIA no longer stands for Central Intelligence Agency. It stands for crash into attacker. Because the moment you think something's going down, you are crashing right into that.
That's right. You got to get close and violent, right?
Yes, you are overwhelming those with significant violence,
right.
And that's how you stay alive. That's how you want to fight. And so that's kind of the mindset.
So counterintuitive because fight or flight, you're going to want to run, but your mind is not clear, and you just make yourself a bigger target. So
right.
Move toward the sound of gunfire. That's what we'd say in SEALs. Anything else that I failed to ask, or you'd like to share? We got to wrap up
you
here.
have so much great stuff. No, I was trying to think. We just finished an evasive driving class. We teach people like how to actually ram through a vehicle in real life and how to do the 180-degree reverse turn.
Oh man, I'd love to do that training.
And you got to
My
come out
son and I would love to
inspired.
do that. We should come out there.
Set that up.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm going to write that down. I'll follow up with you. How much do you charge for something like that for the listeners?
So yeah, my 2-day course is $2,500.
Okay.
And most of my clients are high net worth executives, business guys, security guys. And
do they stay at the ranch or do they stay in town?
So they stay in town. So my ranch is 20 miles from the hotel. And the ranch is 320 acres of the most beautiful sagebrush you'll ever see is what I joke about. So by the time we're done training, everybody wants to go back and have a nice shower and a good meal, which is why we stay in town.
That's cool. And do you set up your own track for the evasive driving, or do you use the dirt?
We set up everything. We teach real ramming. Like, hey, this is based on the agency. There's my good legalese. Based on what the agency taught me.
Right.
So it's like real ramming, meaning you're going to be in a car, you're going to have a helmet for safety, but you're going to see what a real roadblock is. You're going to crash through that roadblock, and I have a truck with a safety bumper specially made for me. Because years ago when I started doing this, I had one of those police bumpers where like, no, just put this police bumper. That sucker cracked like 1 or 2 times after we did it. So I went to a buddy of mine who's a welder, and I said, here's what we're doing, here's what I need. And he constructed this like indestructible bumper. But yeah, it's all real legit training, but in a safe way.
No, that's awesome. Jason, where do you like people to come to find you or to reach out to you?
Keep it easy. Just go to my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Jason Hanson CIA, and that's how you can get in touch with me and everything.
What's your website URL?
So my website is spybriefinggear.com.
Spybriefinggear.com. Okay, we'll put those up here too. Man, what a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights with the folks listening. I do want to come out there and visit you. My son loves cars, loves driving. I think we would probably have a ball at your training. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. All right, take care. It's really nice to see you, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Mark.